Hi everyone! In this video, we're going to talk about extrema of functions of two variables. So when I say extrema, I'm really talking about extreme values of a function. And so we've all heard one time or another the terms maximum and minimum. So maximum, of course, being the greatest possible value and minimum being the smallest possible value. And so we're actually going to explore two different types of extrema in Calculus 3, which are called absolute extrema and relative extrema. Now, I just want you to recall that we have studied extrema of functions before, but that was only with functions of one variable, so of the form y equals f of x. But in Calculus 3, multivariate calculus, we're actually going to be looking at two variable functions. And our definitions, despite the change in the types of functions that we're finding these extrema for, the definitions actually remain the same or are very similar. And so here, if you look at this table, I have the definition of these two types of extrema in math language, but ultimately, what I really want you to take away from this is that when I think of absolute extrema, I am looking at only the highest peak and lowest valley of our function on an interval. Whereas relative extrema, I am looking for all of the peaks and valleys that are on an interval. So let's consider what this means when we look at this mountain range picture. So if I'm thinking about the relative maxima, I'm thinking about every peak in my mountain range. So here I've highlighted 4 distinct peaks of this mountain range, which all of them would be considered relative maximums. And then the minimums that are relative minimums are going to be any valleys that we have. And so here I've highlighted 4 different valleys of our mountain range. And now, if I want to find the absolute maximum and minimum, that means that I'm looking for the absolute tallest peak of the mountain range and the absolute lowest peak of our mountain range. And so here we have, of these 4 relative maxima, the tallest is going to be this one here on the left. So that's going to be our absolute maximum. Whereas looking at all of these lowest points, or all of our valleys, we need to find the lowest of the valleys, which is going to be this one here at water level. And that is what we are going to call our absolute minimum. And so one thing that I want you to note here is that when it comes to relative extrema, we can actually have more than one. So we aren't guaranteed to, but we may have many, so more than one. Whereas for the absolute maximums and minimums, we only have one of each of those. And so this is something to keep in mind when you are finding these extrema. But one thing that I do want to point out is that, like, let's say that 2 of these peaks were the same height and they were both the highest, then we would have our one absolute maximum but occurring at 2 different places. Same thing for minimums. And why are we studying this? Why is this important? Well, it can translate to areas of geography, physics, and economics, and probably something that you may have studied in the past, or at least heard about on the news, is financial math. So when we're looking to maximize our profits or revenue, we want to find, well, where are all of our spikes occurring in our functions? Or where are those valleys occurring? And what's causing those when we're considering the time and the profits and revenue that we have. And so it can be helpful in many different areas, not just even in those that I've highlighted. So first,